This is all it takes is someone has to stand in the front. That's how it goes. It works in your class? Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. I am Kathy Hajib, and on behalf of the Lassonde Entrepreneur Institute, I'd like to welcome all of you here to the University of Utah and to the David Eccles School of Business. But more importantly, I'd like to extend a broader invitation to all of you to join our student community of innovators and entrepreneurs. One of the goals of the Lassonde Institute is to bring student innovators and entrepreneurs the resources, the support, and the community partners that help them launch new ideas and start businesses. Our goal is that students have a transformative life experience at the university. So many of you know about our new Lassonde Studios building that we're building on campus to serve as a hub of activity for these students. Well, it was about 2 years ago we were talking with a local industry partner when he expressed a wish that more University of Utah students had the opportunity to learn the tools that his employees used in their everyday job. It was at the same time that we had a growing number of young engineering students tell us they'd really love to find some business students and a place to hang out where they could refine their design skills and where they could be better prepared for industry. It was these conversations that were the catalyst for today's announcement about our work that we're doing with PTC to bring product design, product life management, and Internet of Things tools to the University of Utah. University of Utah students and faculty will have access to PTC Creo, PTC Windchill, PTC ThingWorks, and e-learning tools, all that will help you create, design, and manage your product ideas. So we thank you for that. We're really excited to bring these industry tools into the hands of students so they can practice real-life industry skills prior to launching their careers. PTC tools, industry conversations and workshops, prototyping space, and other great resources for University of Utah students will be at the Lassonde Studios. And I hope all of you have October 10th on your calendars to join us for the groundbreaking and a 3D sneak peek of what that building will have. Today, we are honored to have President and CEO Jim Heppelmann with us to share his insights and vision for the future of product design, manufacturing, and innovation, all in the Internet of Things space. Mr. Heppelmann has worked in the information technology industry since 1985, has an extensive experience developing and deploying large-scale product development systems within the manufacturing marketplace. But prior to joining PTC, Mr. Heppelmann was an innovator and entrepreneur himself. He was the co-founder and chief technology officer of Windchill Technology, a Minnesota-based company acquired by PTC in 1998. Isn't that what all of the startups, all of the students that have created startups hope for? Is that someday a big company will acquire their startup? Mr. Heppelmann is joined today by a number of his PTC colleagues. We welcome all of you to the university, and we look forward to a collaboration of supporting our student innovators and entrepreneurs. So thank you for joining us, and I'll turn the time over to Jim.
Great. Well, thank you for that nice introduction, and I'm pleased to be here today to, share with you what I'm thinking about. And I've been thinking a lot about the Internet of Things lately. I thought I would review a little bit my background as an entrepreneur. You've heard some of that, but let me say I myself am an engineer, and when I went through engineering school, I really focused a lot on the computer science applications of engineering, which of course landed me in companies that made engineering software. And so that's where I've spent a lot of my career. I started out in a company doing engineering software, doing pre-sales and post-sales consulting, which meant I spent a lot of time with customers. So I learned a tremendous amount. That landed me in a job doing product management, which means planning products. So I went from trying to deploy products and complaining about all the issues to being in charge of planning them so the issues would go away. At that point, I was thrust into a joint venture where two companies took their human assets, put them together, and created a new company. And that was a startup. We started from scratch. It was a lot of fun. It wasn't entrepreneurial in the sense that I didn't have a big stake in it. I didn't own the company. So while the company did well, I didn't actually do that well. I mean, I did okay, but I wasn't getting rich. So at that point, along came the internet. And when I started playing with the internet, I had one of those moments like entrepreneurs do, where I say, this is going to completely change the way what I do should be done. Somebody's going to figure that out. Why not me? So one day I just up and quit my job. I was a chief technology officer. I quit my job and started a company. I'll tell you, I didn't know the first thing about starting a company. So good for you guys that you have a program that's going to teach you something, because I just got lucky and figured it out. But anyway, that company was trying to figure out how can we use the internet and the web to connect engineers all around the world together so they can work on common designs at the same time, across the country and across the world. That now is a practice that every major global manufacturing company does, and a tremendous amount of them do it with our software. So that little business I started is today about a $600 million business, and I'm the CEO of the company that acquired my little company. So I tell you this second, a second lesson here is, as exciting as it is to be acquired by a big company, to have your startup acquired, it's even more exciting to hang around and come to run that bigger company. So anyway, so that's what I've been doing. I've been the chief technology officer then of the bigger PTC company. PTC is about 6,000 employees, about $1.5 billion of revenue, $4.5 billion market cap public company. So I was the CTO for about 10 years, and then for the last 5 years, I've been the CEO, which has been even more fun. So it turns out that PTC has an intersection with the University of Utah already around the Evans and Sutherland company. So back in 1995, we acquired a main part of the Evans and Sutherland business called CDRS, which was a conceptual design and rendering system. So that was a technology that was developed here on campus and then sold to PTC, I think, for like $25 million or something like that back in 1995. So that was the first intersection. And then the second one really is participating in this program, supplying a lot of the software that we sell to everybody else, at great cost. The software that we're donating generally would cost from $5,000 to $15,000 per person if you were to buy it on the street, sort of depending upon the configuration and the quantity and stuff like that. So we're donating that, and you'll have a good opportunity to play, not with toy software you can download, but with the real McCoy that real companies use to design plane, trains, automobiles, space stations, stuff like that. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. Okay, so about PTC, this is our mission statement. We help companies transform the way they create, operate, and service products. So it turns out that in the Internet of Things, things are products. So you could say we help people create, operate, and service things. Now, there are other kinds of things. People can be things on the Internet of Things, and cows can be things, but it still comes down to something that came out of a factory that's attached to or embedded in the person or the cow and so forth that really still is a manufactured product. So we help 28,000 companies around the world do this sort of thing. While I'm in Salt Lake for a couple days here, I'm going to talk to about 40 of them. There's about 40 companies in the Salt Lake area here that use our technology to do this. And so far, all of them I've talked to are trying to figure out what does the Internet of Things mean for our business. And that's because things are changing. We're going through a period of tremendous flux. And I'll give you some frameworks to think about this in a minute. But the very nature of things that companies make are changing dramatically. And I like to say there's at least 3 big changes. First of all, the way you deliver value is shifting from hardware to software. Even if you're making tractors, there's probably as many software engineers working on this tractor as there are mechanical engineers these days, because there's so much software embedded in it. So there's been a huge shift from hardware to software. Now there's a big shift from the software being in the product to the software being in the cloud that the product's talking to. For example, if I want to add a feature to this tractor, I can add it in hardware, or I could add it in software. I can put the software in the tractor, or I can put the software in the cloud talking to the tractor. And there's some kinds of software that you can do in the cloud that you could never, ever do or maintain actually in the product itself. And then the third thing, which is somewhat independent but definitely lubricated by these first 2 trends, is the movement from products to services. That more and more companies are deploying a service-oriented business model. And the smarter and more connected your products are, the more likely that you're going to be able to deploy them efficiently and effectively in a service model. In fact, the better your smart connected product strategy works, the more you might want to change your business model so you don't give away all the value you're creating to the customer, but you figure out a way to claw that value back to your side of the table. For example, if you make it extremely efficient to service products, great win for the customer because they don't have to pay so much to have the product serviced. Bad news for you if you have quite a large service and spare parts business because you're killing your own business by driving down the cost of servicing that product. So you might think of flipping the business model and saying to the customer, you don't have to buy the product anymore. Just pay for it as you use it, and I'll service it for you. That'll be bundled into the price. Therefore, all that service efficiency returns to me, the manufacturer. You know, this is kind of common in some industries. Jet engines are sold that way, you know, GE Power by the Hour and Rolls-Royce and so forth. But it's showing up in bicycle sharing and automobile sharing and lots of different places, you know, to varying degrees that product-oriented business models are transitioning toward service-oriented business models enabled in part by smart connected product strategies. So what about the Internet of Things? Well, we at PTC don't use that phrase too much. We tend to talk more about smart connected products. But just a couple observations. When I think about Internet of Things, I always remind people it's not really about the Internet this time. It's about the things. Because the Internet's not actually changing. It's pretty much the same Internet we had 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago. That's not where the action is. The action isn't all in Silicon Valley. The action is in the manufacturing companies around the world because they're creating a whole new generation of things that look and act very, very differently. Now, the second reason, or the second thing I point out to people about the Internet of Things is think about it. Why would you connect a thing to the Internet? Why would you even bother? Well, the sort of number 1, 2, and 3 answers are so you could service it better, so you could operate it better, and so you could make it better, right? So that a little bit is why PTC's in this business. We help people create, operate, and service things, and basically by connecting those things to the Internet, you can do all of that so much better. Simply put, you get a feedback loop. You know what's going on, you can react to that. You can change the product, you can send different instructions to it, you can understand when a failure is building and so forth, and act very differently. Now, one of the places I think this is going to have a big impact is in healthcare because we're now instrumenting things that go onto or inside of people, and you know this is the famous Jarvik heart, and just sort of thinking about how would you do that differently if you did it today. And definitely you'd fill that thing with instrumentation and connectivity and software, and you'd put a bunch of software in the cloud, and you'd know every single thing that was happening at a fine-grained level of detail all the time. Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit and say, how has product design changed? Well, if you look at this picture, and let's start at the bottom. You know, a product used to be physical. You could model it in a 3D CAD system. You could model everything there was to model, or everything there was to create in a 3D CAD system. So they were hardware, hard physical things. Then over time, products became smart. Smart sort of preceded connected. And people began to put a lot of software along with the hardware in those things. So there's software in your anti-lock brakes, and there's software in your engine, in your car, and there's software in your windshield wipers that turn on and off when they sense rain. And there's software, you know, in your navigation system, and there's software in your digital display on your cockpit, and so forth. So that was smart products. The big breakthrough that happened more recently is connectivity sort of became more ubiquitous and less expensive and so forth, and people said, geez, if I have a product running software with a CPU in it, why don't I just add some connectivity, give it an IP address, and now I can talk to it like any other computer that I'm dealing with. And so that happened, and we began to connect these products to the cloud, and to a concept we call a product cloud. Some people call it a device cloud. But what I'm sort of saying is to build a modern product, you're building both physical stuff, which would be hardware and electronics, you're building software that's in the product, and you're building a massive now amount of software that's in the cloud. And very few manufacturing companies know how to build the part that goes in the cloud. For example, if you produce mining equipment, you know all the mechanical engineering around mining equipment. And you probably struggled a little bit when you started to put software in the engines and software in the sensors and so forth. But now somebody says, okay, now we need a cloud. And it's got to scale well, it's got to perform well, it has to be secure, we're going to need big data analytics, And the engineering teams are just saying, what are you talking about? We've never done anything like that before. And I think therein lies a bit of the entrepreneurial opportunity is a lot of people are going to make a lot of money figuring out how to do this. And, probably some of you will be amongst the group. So in the cloud, we're trying to typically gather together data from a fleet of products. We're trying to do both structured and big data analytics to it. Structured being sort of if-then statement. If the oil pressure is too high, then there's a problem. And big data being more like pattern detection and correlation and so forth. Like every time this set of sensors behaves in this way, 2 weeks later we have a major failure. I don't know why, but I've learned that this pattern of sensor reading precedes a failure, and therefore I'm going to start watching for that pattern of sensor readings and intervening and taking corrective action. Then we want to build new applications, and we want to tap into the data coming from those products and analytics, and also tap into the data coming from business systems and build things that run on smartphones and whatnot and so forth. So now if I lay over PTC brand names and talk a little bit about what PTC is doing and the technology that we're making available here for the school to use, let's start at the bottom, Creo, for 3D modeling and 3D printing and so forth. You can model some pretty sophisticated products in Creo. So that's the sort of product part. Then Windchill is to manage the recipe and the change, sort of the team sport of product design. Creo is kind of for a user to design something. Windchill's looking over the backs and shoulders of many users, trying to coordinate everybody's work so it all comes together, even if those people are spread around the world and are constantly changing things and so forth. It's sort of like a big source code management system for product designs, if you will. Then our ThingWorx technology, and you'll see some stuff here labeled Exida, which will shortly be rebranded ThingWorx. We acquired both companies, but we're merging them together. So what Exida provides in this diagram is the agent that you would put in this smart product to make it a smart connected product. So that understands all the different protocols that help you get from the product up to the cloud. Could be 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, satellite, you name it. Lots of different ways to get to the cloud. Then Exida provides this device cloud, or what I generically call a product database, the database of all the products and all the things that have happened and are happening to those products. Then our ThingWorx technology is used to do analytics and integrate with business systems and create new apps that you can use to control those products, monitor those products, and so forth. So this is our software stack, and what we're putting in place here at the school in particular is Creo, Windchill, and Exida/ThingWorx. So we'll give you this kind of whole, complete closed-loop view of how to develop a complete smart connected product, the hardware, the software, the embedded and the cloud elements of it all, okay? So that's what we're up to at PTC. Now, why is that interesting? Well, we created a framework saying, what can you do with a smart connected product that you couldn't do with a dumb product or even just a smart product? And, let me say, I think that smart amplifies the capabilities of a physical product, and connected amplifies the capability of a smart product. So it's like an exponential thing. As you go from physical to smart and connected, you get more and more capabilities. So if you start at the bottom, well, obvious things, you can monitor the health or the condition of the product. On the other side, you can monitor what the product's doing, and sometimes that's even more interesting. And in the middle, you can monitor the environment in which the product's doing that thing. For example, a lot of sophisticated equipment has to be kept in a cooled room or it'll overheat. So understanding the temperature of the room is kind of important when you understand why you keep having so many warranty problems. So the ability to monitor these orthogonal concepts of condition, environment, and operation gives you the ability to set alerts and notifications and so forth. Given that as a platform, you move up a level and you control the product. You can have remote control and change what the product's doing, send commands to it, and so forth. You can also reconfigure the product, change its user interface, give it new settings, parameters. Think of your coffee maker, when to turn on, how many cups to make, how hot, how strong, when to turn off, etc. You could also, moving up a level from there, optimize. That's where you start running algorithms saying, how do I get more value out of this thing? For example, elevators in tall buildings. Think of big banks of elevators and buildings. Almost all of those now are moving to optimization algorithms. Because if every elevator stops at the next floor, you don't actually move many people. It's better off to have some elevators skip floors, even where people are waiting to get on, because there's another elevator coming behind that doesn't have any people in it. So why slow down all the people that are in this elevator, and then the next one stands there idle with nothing to do. So elevators would be a good example of optimizing by monitoring the traffic patterns of people coming in and out of a building, optimize what it's doing. The other point would be optimize its uptime. Perform diagnostics and repair and so forth. Try to make sure the product works better. That's a big, big deal because a lot of times a given product is used in a string of products in a, let's say, continuous process. And when one thing goes down, everybody else has to stop. For example, in an underground mining operation, you have some machines that are digging through the ore, other machines that are conveying the rough ore to some kind of a crushing machine, and then other machines that are conveying from the crusher to some external conveyor or train system or something like that. If anything goes down, everybody else has to stop. And you got hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment idle waiting for one guy to come back online. So your ability to make sure you're monitoring and have no unexpected failures because you see a problem coming 3 days ahead of time and during a planned outage you fix it proactively can save tons and tons of money. And then at the top level, automate. That's where you start to give products the ability to make their own decisions. They're considering lots of different algorithms, lots of different data feeds, and they start deciding what to do all by themselves. The Google car kind of being the classical example. But to get to autonomy, you really need to build up with lots of different layers kind of underneath it. So anyway, this is an interesting way that we use with customers to say, what are you going to do with smart connected products? So I'll have this conversation 40 times while I'm here this week, talking to customers about what does smart connected products mean to your type of business? Where could you go? What could you do? And there's some pretty interesting answers. So most of those answers involve new applications. So everybody's seen charts like this that say how big the Internet of Things is going to be. This is sort of Cisco's talk track, that in 2010 there were 5 billion people on Earth and 1 billion things connected to the Internet. 5 billion people connected and 1 billion things connected. By 2020, there will be 7 billion people connected and 50 billion things connected. And by 2035, 9 billion people and 1 trillion things. That's interesting. But think about it from an application standpoint. We would argue there has to be an explosion in applications because each time a new kind of thing comes online, we need a whole new family of applications for monitoring, controlling, optimizing, etc. We need applications to give feedback to the engineers who made it, the operators who are operating it, the service technicians that are supposed to keep it serviced and available, and so forth. So we believe at PTC there will be a massive explosion in applications, which is one of the reasons we provide tools to build such applications. And I think, for entrepreneurs, this by itself is a huge opportunity because I think there's going to be a whole new generation of software developed, and it's going to be software in many cases that's specific to a certain type of problem. It won't it's not like Microsoft Office or Microsoft Windows that thousands of people use the same piece of software. If you're at Fresenius building the kind of medical devices and equipment that they build, you're going to need a certain set of applications related to kidney dialysis. And they're not going to be the same ones that Bort Longyear uses for mining equipment. They're going to have a different set of applications. So we think there's going to be lots and lots and lots of new opportunities created here. So then just in the last part of my talk here, I wanted to give you a preview of a little piece of academic work I've done with a pretty famous professor that's going to get published here shortly. And it builds on some of the things I've talked about, and I'll give you a peek into some more. So I happen to have on my board of directors Professor Michael Porter from Harvard Business School. And some of you know that name. He's perhaps the most well-known professor in the United States of America. He's certainly the most well-known professor at Harvard. Harvard's one of the most well-known universities. So he, in sitting on our board of directors, after a while said, Jim, I got to talk to you about this because you keep rambling on about all this exciting stuff, and I'm actually pretty excited. I'd like to do some research. So I've already talked to you about the architecture for a product and some of the new capabilities that would give differentiation and operational effectiveness. He and I also took some of his frameworks. Porter invented the concept of a value chain. In fact, if you Google the word value chain, first paragraph pops up Michael Porter. He also created a pretty famous framework called Porter's 5 Forces for analyzing industry structures and how our industry is changing. So we said, okay, let's think about value chains. How do value chains change because of smart connected products? And how do industries change because of smart connected products? And we did all this research and wrote it up, and HBR is going to publish it here in the month of November shortly. But I just want to cherry pick some of the findings because they're sort of interesting. Start with Porter's 5 Forces. Just a quick intro here. I'm not a B-school student myself, but, I've spent enough time with Porter over the last decade. It starts in the middle, which is what is the nature of competition between competitors in a given industry? Is it cost-based competition, which is destructive and painful and ruins everybody's profit? Or are there other vectors, differentiation and so forth that people compete upon? Then if you go to the bottom, barriers to entry, is it easy for new competitors to get into this market? And is it getting easier or is it getting harder? Then if you go to the left, for suppliers, is it easier, or your suppliers becoming stronger and demanding more of the profit pool, or are they becoming weaker and you can squeeze them tighter and tighter and give them less of the profit pool? If you move to the right, what about buyers and downstream channels? Are your relationships with your customers getting better, or are they getting worse? Are you gaining more power over your distributors and your customers, or are they gaining more power over you? And then at the top, what is the threat that there's some substitute product that just makes your whole concept unnecessary? Sort of like cell phones, smartphones have kind of destroyed the camera industry. Anybody bought a camera lately? Why? Everybody's carrying one around all the time now. This guy in the back using his iPad there to take a picture. So let me just run through this quickly. I don't have a lot of time to do it in any detail, but bargaining power of suppliers. The net here, we show the pluses and the minuses in this article, but the net is this is actually not that good for most established manufacturing companies. Maybe a good opportunity for entrepreneurs, but a lot of manufacturing companies who know everything there is to know about milling and casting and shaping steel don't know a lot about smart connected products, and they will have to turn to suppliers for a lot of the technology and so forth. Sometimes it'll be suppliers like PTC. Sometimes it'll be suppliers like Google or Apple or so forth. So think in the automotive industry, if you've been in that industry or know about it, it's a cutthroat industry, and the OEMs are almost abusive towards suppliers. They squeeze the suppliers so hard that it's very difficult for automotive suppliers to make much money. Okay, so automotive companies, OEMs have the upper hand, but when Google or Apple enters that discussion, it ain't like that anymore. Apple's the most valuable company on the planet, and Google's number 3, last time I looked. So even General Motors, Ford, Toyota, Hyundai, they can't push these guys around. So they're not going to be able to dictate terms to this new class of suppliers that they completely depend upon. They can't claw the business back because they don't know how to do it. So that's the big takeaway there. If you go to threat, substitute products and services, there is the cell phone example. We think in general, there's a positive factor, which is with smart connected products, you're going to build a tighter relationship with your customer or your user, and that in general makes switching costs higher, and it also makes substitution costs higher because you have to also overcome. For example, let's say your next automobile has a completely configurable dashboard, and you set it up just the way you want. You're probably going to want to go back to that same brand so you can transfer and reconfigure it. That's why it's painful to switch from a Mac to a PC and back again. You invest so much in setting it up just the way you want it. So part of that might come later to rivalry, other forms of rivalry. But in general, that's not the biggest change. But in some industries, it'll be very big. Looking downstream to buyers is very interesting because for the first time ever, many companies are going to know who their customers actually are and how their customers use their products and how those products perform in that customer use. There's a lot of companies like Whirlpool making appliance who don't even know who their customers are because Whirlpool ships the appliance to Home Depot or Sears or somebody like that. Home Depot sells it to the end user. Nobody even tells Whirlpool who the end user is, so they're completely blind. But when those machines are smart and connected, whole different story. Now Whirlpool knows who they are, when they do laundry, which cycle they run, do they use hot water, cold water, big loads, small loads. They know all that stuff, and they can begin to think how to market more things to you, how to build the products better, how to take features out of the products they don't use, and so forth. They might also conclude that they don't really need Home Depot and Sears. I think in Whirlpool's case they probably do, but a lot of you know about the Tesla story, electric automobiles. So Teslas are electric, and that's cool, but they're also the smartest, most connected automobile anybody's ever built. Tesla does not have dealers, and they've argued they don't need dealers because they know who all their customers are, they know how the products are operating, they can sell them over the internet or in a shopping mall store. They don't really need dealers. They don't need dealers for physical proximity to the end customer, because they have complete high-fidelity digital proximity to those customers. They don't need dealers to be nearby because they know everything that's going on. So they've argued and people have fought against them, but they've prevailed sort of in this idea that we don't need dealerships anymore, which of course radically changes how an industry works. Again, I'm moving fast here. If we come to barriers to entry, we think in general the barriers are going up. However, in some industry, incumbents will be complacent and they'll get leapfrogged. But the going up argument is that now to build a product, you can't just build a widget on a 3D printer because you can't print the software and you can't print the cloud. So you can print the thing on 3D, that's great, but you're going to have to build that whole or somehow procure that whole cloud infrastructure too to compete. And that's a lot of stuff. That may cost more than it costs to engineer and build the first units of the physical product. So it's getting harder for people to come into this business. They have to do a lot more to get to the point where they can ship their first product and gain revenue. Now, on the other hand, some companies will be slow to do this. They don't have a vision for it. They don't have expertise for it. They'll drag their feet, and somebody might leapfrog them. And that'll be interesting. So there's some industry that's already happened. In the music industry, for example, when the music industry almost overnight went from physical media to digital media, streaming music, a whole lot of people missed that coming. And all it really was music getting connected to the cloud and using the cloud as a way to stream in the music so you didn't need the physical media. Companies like Sonos were startup companies, I don't know, somewhere around $500 million in revenue right now because they came out with a concept, and for years, if you wanted streaming Wi-Fi music, you had to go buy it from Sonos because everybody else had been leapfrogged and would take years then to kind of come out with a Me Too type of product. They all have, and it's changing the dynamics again, but nonetheless pretty productive for Sonos. And then finally, on the basic competition, what makes for good competition is good differentiation in an industry that overall is growing. What makes for bad competition is price-based competition in an industry that isn't growing or worse yet, even shrinking. So we think this will make the industry grow and will open up many new vectors for differentiation and good, healthy competition where everybody wins by being different and meeting different needs in an industry that's growing. Okay, then just last, I cherry-picked a couple of things on this value chain discussion because there are some pretty profound implications for the value chain. This is Porter's framework for value chain. And one thing first to look at is technology development. So I've already explained the whole concept of a smart connected product involves many new dimensions of product design and system engineering and much more software and cloud and so forth. There's other things that can be done though. For example, the idea of evergreen products. If you buy a Tesla, when you park in your garage at night, it upgrades itself and you get yourself a brand new Tesla in the morning. I mean, not brand new, but better than it was when you went to sleep last night. That's a concept we all know with software is you can keep upgrading it and patching it and doing this and doing that. We can now do that to products. We can also move product variation from hardware into software. So if you think about like automobiles, when you go to buy one, there's all these different features you could buy or not buy and add or not add, and they all cost money and so forth. You probably don't understand the manufacturing complexity behind that and the spare parts complexity and so forth. So for example, if you can buy a car with 4 different horsepower engines, then somebody needs to maintain all the spare parts for all of the 4 different mechanically different engines for the next 20 years. Huge cost. But if you could ship one engine and derate it or upgrade it with software, then you can have a mechanically identical engine that can be sold at 4 different horsepower levels simply by flipping a bit in some software. You achieve the exact same thing. Customers will pay for horsepower. They don't really care if you achieve more horsepower by flipping a bit or by making all the pistons bigger. Doesn't really matter to the customer. It matters a heck of a lot to the manufacturer. I like to say, if you think about smartphones, iPhones, that's the ultimate for how far you can go with this, because if everybody pulled out their Android or iOS smartphone right now and we all compared them carefully, we'd see each and every one is different and unique. All of the variation, though, almost all of it, is in software, because mechanically they're almost identical, particularly from a single vendor. Like Microsoft provides a couple of colors, a couple of memory configurations, and that's kind of about it. But when you take it home, you keep playing with the bill of material and adding things to it and so forth. So huge amount of new design principles coming out. The example about customer relationship and how it changes the way you work with the customers. You know, this ability to know who your customer is and how they use your products really has a profound implication, even on the way you do CRM. You know, normally people think of a customer relationship management system as a place where you track your relationship with the customer, basically based on the customer calling you or not to complain about things. So you talk to the customer on the phone to find out if the customer likes your product and are they happy with it. And then you put a record of that phone call in a database. That's CRM today. The way CRM will be done tomorrow, as it won't be done like that, you'll be monitoring the apparent satisfaction level of your customers by determining how often they use and don't use your product and how often that product seems to perform well for them. They won't have to call you. You'll call them and say, it looks like the product's not working that well. I want to stop by and see if I can fix it. That's actually how Tesla does it. You know, Tesla calls you and says, there's a problem with your battery. Can we swing by tomorrow afternoon and put a new one in it? And they've got the highest customer satisfaction in the automotive industry because they're not waiting for bad things to happen and angry people to make phone calls that they track in a database. They're being very proactive by monitoring what's going on without ever talking to the customer. And then another one, the biggest one of all, is after-sales service, which is sort of that Tesla example, which is when things fail, not only are the failures themselves more catastrophic, but it damages customer satisfaction, and in any kind of a process, it may damage a whole lot more other things that also have to stop. So in general, the main reason people connect big industrial things to the internet is to service them better because you know what's going on. So you can be proactive in service, try to avoid problems rather than fix them. You know, in the healthcare example, it's a lot better to avoid a heart attack than to try to repair one. It's the same thing with a piece of industrial equipment. It's just a lot better to not let the bad thing happen because you see the situation developing. And then if you do see a situation developing, or if a bad thing happened, now you can go fix it with full knowledge of what the problem is. I always say if the oven in my kitchen doesn't work, it requires 2 service calls. First, somebody has to come to my house, walk into my kitchen, look at my oven, see what model it is, study it a little bit, form some theory as to why it doesn't work, and then they say, I'll be back next week when I have the spare parts, right? Because how could they possibly know what spare parts to bring when they don't know what oven I have or what the problem is? So then they come back later. The problem is that 2-pass service call costs more than the oven costs. So that model just doesn't work. So in the future, my oven will tell somebody, hey, here's who I am and how I'm configured and all my sensor readings, and oh, by the way, I'm not heating up quite like I should. There's a problem developing in the burner element. You probably ought to swing by in the next couple of weeks and slap a new one in here. So that's, you know, the kind of thing that's happening here in the world of service. So then one last thing, just sort of to close on, is we think overall this is changing industry boundaries as well. Because companies are saying, and there's a farming example here. John Deere's a big customer of ours, by the way. But if you start, John Deere once upon a time made simple tractors. And then they made smart tractors. And then they made smart and connected tractors so that they could monitor them for service needs and so forth. And then they get the idea that actually we could build a product system. Because if you think of a big plot of land where a machine is, one machine is harvesting grain, let's say, it could keep track in each square meter or whatever how much grain was harvested in this square meter. And we could use that next year to inform which seed to plant. Some seed works better in a dry area than others. We could inform where to put fertilizer. We could inform where to put water and so forth. So now you get to the idea of what I call a product system, which is a whole system of products that are sharing data with each other, because the way the planter works in the spring is somehow a function of the data gathered by the harvester in the fall, and the way the irrigation system is going to work is also a function of that and so forth. So that would be John Deere saying, hey, why stop with products? We should have whole systems of products that work together. And from there, it's not a big leap to say, you know, why don't we just do smart farms? Why don't we work in weather forecast? Why don't we work in commodity price forecasts? You know, a commodity price forecast might encourage us to plant a different type of grain because the soybean prices are expected to be really high and the corn prices are down, so let's plant in corn, you know, soybeans instead of corn or whatever. And so actually John Deere has 800 people working on smart farm technology thanks to the Internet of Things. The problem is the farther away you get from tractors, the more likely that John Deere can end up competing with Accenture, or actually they're competing against Monsanto, who makes chemicals. And by following that trail, got to the same place. So it's sort of interesting that we see a lot of boundaries changing and not yet settled down, but a lot of people rethinking their whole business. I mean, I was with a company this morning that makes shooting targets, and they have a scheme to turn it into an entertainment business. So they're going from targets to shooting games done in the cloud. You shoot at targets at your site, I'll shoot at targets at my site, we'll keep score against each other through our smartphones. Kind of an interesting idea. But they got from steel targets to entertainment systems by following the same kind of thread. So lots of stuff is happening here, hasn't settled out. I think a lot of people will get too far away from their core competency and end up competing in places where they don't necessarily have any true competitive advantage, and they'll probably go home with their tail between their legs. But, you know, we'll see. Some people will hit some home runs as well, you know, probably already have. Here's another example of that, you know, Nike getting from shoes and clothes all the way over to fitness systems by kind of following that same thread, right? You know, we could make our shoes smart, our clothes smart, or we could build smartphone systems that track all that stuff, and why not just do healthcare? Or another customer of ours, Joy Global, they make mining machinery, and they've gone from mining equipment to we'll run your mine for you, and you can pay us based on the productivity of the mine, because if we can drive up the productivity, you should give us some of that upside because you did it thanks to our mine management system, sort of like Smart Farm, but Smart Mine in this case. So another example of a customer who just in a couple of years moved far, far, far away from its 100-year heritage of building good, heavy-duty, you know, heavy iron mining equipment, thanks to the Internet of Things. Okay, so I'm going to rip through 10 strategic choices that our article ends with. I won't spend a lot of time on them, and hopefully I have time for a question or two. So, first question is, what capabilities should you pursue? There's a lot of things you can do. Not everybody will pay for them. Second question is, where will you put that functionality? We put it in hardware and software. Should you put it in the product or in the cloud? I share the story that when I hit my foot on the brake pedal, I hope that that braking algorithm doesn't consult the cloud before it applies the brake shoes. Okay? But service software is the exact opposite. Don't tell me there's check engine soon. You know, talk to somebody who cares. I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me, right? So that's a good example there. Then should you be open or closed? And maybe the answer is be closed to a certain extent you can defend, and open from there on. You know, a good example is I recently put in new heating ventilating system in my house. It's a closed system. The thermostat is tightly integrated with the air conditioning and the heating systems. But I also have a smart home, and the vendor who sold me HVAC equipment can't sell me smart home, but the HVAC equipment has to interface to the smart home. So they understand that we probably could have all our equipment connected to each other in a closed way and convince Jim to buy all that HVAC equipment from us, but we'll never be able to conquer the whole home. So at that point, our heating and ventilating and air conditioning system better be open to an external home automation. What data do you want to capture and analyze? And there's kind of two parts. One is data requires sensors. And the second question is, of all the sensor data, should some of it be processed in the product, or should all of it be sent up to the cloud, or a subset sent up to the cloud, or what? And there's data transmission costs, there's response time issues, all sorts of things related to what do you want to do as it relates to data. The next piece is how do you manage ownership and access rights? These are just tough questions. In these questions, by the way, are opportunities. And it's not just data ownership and access rights, but it's also how do you shepherd the data? Because as Target and more recently Home Depot have taught us, if you take somebody's data, you better protect it. Because, you know, let's remember Target's actually the victim. But that's not how the story reads. The story was that Target let all your credit cards out in the wild, right? That's not really what happened, but it doesn't matter because that's how these stories are told. So, you know, when you collect data, like Fitbit guys are collecting data and it's fun and all that, but, you know, what if somebody hacks in and they know where you live and where you run and all the rest of that stuff? I don't know. Could be some problems with that. Next piece is, should you try to make money by selling the data? You know, the classic example here is using driving habits to price insurance. That's a good example where somebody is collecting data around driving habits in an automobile and then selling that data to insurance companies who actually find that understanding your driving patterns is a pretty good indicator of your accident rate, and therefore should be factored into the price of the insurance. The next one is how far you want to go with this. You want to do simple products, smart connected products, families of products, or what we call product systems, or systems of systems that are big and complex, smart cities, smart farms, smart mines, all that type of stuff. And, you know, how far can you go before you've stretched your real capacity too far? Another one is how much of this do you want to do yourself, and where should you turn to partners? A lot of people have a tendency in a new era to do more than they actually can pull off. You know, they think, look at this great idea we have. We're the first ones in our industry to do it. But the way technology stacks work is they tend to specialize at every level. You know, once upon a time when I graduated from college, I worked in application software. We created software that ran on databases we created, that ran on operating systems we created, that ran on CPUs we created, with hard drives we created, with memory chips we created, and so forth. And at every level, that broke apart because somebody's better at CPUs, somebody's better at hard drives, somebody's better at memory, better at databases, better at operating systems, and so forth. So this will specialize at levels, but today it's the Wild West. You actually could do all this stuff, you know, yourself, and some people will try. I brought up this question: should you think about changing your, you know, or disintermediating your channel or service network, and then should you think about changing your business model to better capture some of the new value that you're creating? Okay, I went through that fast. I've given this presentation in 2 hours, but I want to do it in enough time here to at least save time for a question or two if you had them. So if anybody in the audience has one, I'll do my best. One in the front row here.
I just want to thank you for your generous contribution to the school, first off.
Thank you.
Great presentation, fascinating. My question has to do with privacy issues. And I just wondered if you would share with us your thoughts on those privacy issues around the connection between the product.
Yeah, so the question was asking me to share my thoughts on privacy issues. And I think there's privacy and there's security. Because there's privacy means what you're willing to share, and then security sort of means when stuff accidentally gets shared that nobody intended to get shared. I think the world needs to figure this one out. And again, there's some entrepreneurial opportunities here. I think we're going to get to this idea that's starting to show up on smartphones around like location services. So when I got my first iPhone, first thing I did was turned off location services. I said, nobody needs to know where I am. You know, I'm thinking Osama bin Laden, every time he pulled out his satellite phone, you know, the Predator rained hellfire on him. I don't need people knowing where I am. But then I found out Google Maps don't work. That's kind of a bummer. And a bunch of other stuff doesn't work. So in the later versions of iOS, you can selectively turn it on or off. I will share my location with Google Maps. I won't share it with, well, for example, at PTC we have a device management system called Iron Mountain, or not Iron Mountain, but anyway, Mobile Iron, thanks. That's a Big Brother system. I turned that off, even though I'm the CEO of the company. You know, I just don't understand. Why do you have to know that, right? I don't understand what you're using it for, so I'm turning it off. So I basically say, if I don't understand what I get out of sharing this with you, I'm not going to share it. So with maps, I get it, perfect, turn it on, it's just fine. But Mobile Iron, forget it. Nobody even explained to me what they were using that for. So I'm not going to let them have it. So anyway, I think somebody needs to figure this out, because we need a simpler way to say, I'm willing or not willing to share this, this, and this in trade for this value proposition and that value proposition and this value proposition. And today, nobody figures that out. What we do today is we give you those crazy click-through agreements that none of us could ever possibly read, because they're just written in the worst mumbo-jumbo and they're 40 pages long, when really they're saying, can I tell people where you are? But it takes 40 pages to say that, and we just say, agree, right? That's what I say, I mean, because it takes too long to study all that stuff. So we got to find a better way as an industry. You entrepreneurs should find a better way, right?
Jim, what should this group do, students particularly, to prepare themselves for the changing future?
Yeah, so the question is, what should students do to prepare themselves for the changing future? So, I mean, this is where PTC is trying to help. You know, we're trying to create a program here that you could take a set of sensors and hook them to a Raspberry Pi and duct tape the sensors on the back of your buddy and hook your buddy to the Internet of Things with a Raspberry Pi and create an app to track where they are and how fast they're moving and, you know, when they sleep at night and all that kind of stuff. To understand the whole plumbing and then get the creative juices flowing to then say, okay, I'm educated in the whole concept. What should I actually do? Where can I create value? Where can I create a viable business? So that's kind of my recommendation, and that's why we're excited to participate in this program. This is really the first for us, where we've taken this whole stack of technology and packaged it up and gave it to a bunch of people and said, you know, play with it and see what you come up with. So I'll tell you, our card-carrying customers are pretty excited about the technology that, you know, we're sort of making available here at the university. So I certainly know of at least 40 companies locally who would be interested in hiring you if you don't decide to do something on your own. Okay, so I think it's top of the hour. We're out of time. Thank you all. Hopefully I imparted some wisdom. I'm not sure, but anyway, thanks. Nice having this opportunity to come talk to you.